Where did God come from? It's a question that challenges the very foundation of our beliefs, and yet most of us never stop to confront it. Imagine for a moment, before there was light, time, or even the universe itself, God was already there. But how? What if the answer to this question held the key to understanding everything? Your life, your purpose, and the mystery of creation. If you've ever wondered how a spiritual being could create everything we know, stay with me. What we're about to uncover could reshape your view of reality, and you won't want to miss the insight that could change everything. Some say God created the earth 6,000 years ago in 6 days. But, to be philosophically honest, the question naturally arises, where did God come from? Once we contemplate the origin of God, how can we grasp the influence of a spiritual being over a material universe? If we believe that God created everything, then logic leads us to ask, who created God? This launches a cycle of inquiries. Who created God? And who created the one who created God? This pursuit of truth stretches into infinity, challenging our minds and prompting us to question the depths of the unknown. Let's dive deeper into the question, who created God? By asking this, we entertain the idea of a created God. This very inquiry reveals a significant point. The belief in God as the Creator is foundational to our understanding. However, the question is compelling because it forces us to consider a fundamental concept, the impossibility of something emerging from nothing. If we agree that nothing can come from nothing, we arrive at a vital conclusion. Something must have always existed, otherwise we would be stuck in eternal nothingness. Therefore, we are all led to believe that something has eternally existed. This is the only rational explanation. For if nothing comes from nothing, then the fact that we exist means something has always been. The concept of something eternal is the key to understanding the mystery of creation. So, here's the dilemma. Everything we know about the physical world leads us to doubt that anything can exist eternally, particularly since the Big Bang Theory became widely accepted in the 1930s. Our understanding of the universe has shifted. The theory suggests that the universe is a temporary manifestation, one iteration in an infinite series. Consider the evidence. The universe is constantly changing. Energy is slowly being consumed. The second law of thermodynamics, well established, shows us that energy depletes over time. Stars lose energy, and the universe's expansion seems to be accelerating beyond our comprehension. All of this implies that the physical universe as we know it cannot be something that has existed eternally. This leads to the ultimate question. Whatever has existed eternally must be entirely different from what we observe today. The initial cause, the source of all, must be something beyond our understanding. We are compelled to explore the true nature of this mystery that transcends our physical reality. While the idea of eternal existence may seem daunting, let me offer a different perspective. Everything we perceive as part of the contingent world, things that could be otherwise, are merely temporary manifestations. Even solid objects like this chair in front of you were once only possibilities on the edge of non-being. They are not permanent. They will eventually vanish. The truth is, none of these things can explain their existence. They are all interconnected, like dominoes in a chain of dependent contingencies. Eventually, we must conclude that something fundamental, something entirely different, must exist beyond what we are trying to explain. When it comes to God, the central claim of Christian, Jewish, and Islamic traditions is that God is eternal. Therefore, the question of God's origin doesn't apply to him by definition. The only argument against this would be to assume that everything is created. But that leads us back to the same point. The ancient Greeks pondered this, which is why the Gospel of John opens with the words, "In the beginning was the Word." This phrase invites us to recognize that everything originates from something eternal and transcendent, something that existed before all else. The ancient Greeks considered two categories, what is created and what has always existed. Ultimately, this boils down to whether something or someone never came into existence. Christians believe that this eternal being is God, a belief central to their faith. The question of who created God might seem valid to some, but I would argue that it's not. For those who claim the universe created everything, I pose a question. Who created the creator of the universe? This question often leaves people puzzled. I've asked this to many scientists, and I recall one instance where I spoke with a group of about 1,000 scientists. A physicist approached me afterward and said, "It's interesting what you say about God, but as a Christian, you believe in the Trinity, that Jesus was both God and man. Isn't that absurd? Can you explain that to me?" I replied, "Of course I can. But first, let me ask you a question. What is consciousness?" He thought for a moment and admitted he didn't know. So I followed up. What is energy? As a physicist, he answered that while he could measure it, he didn't truly know what it was either. I pressed on. Well, my question isn't about measurement. My question is, do you believe in consciousness? He nodded. And do you believe in energy? Again, he confirmed. I then remarked, you believe in these two things, yet you've admitted that you don't fully understand what they are, so don't worry about it. You're an intellectual, he responded. Please don't call me that, I concluded, but that's exactly what you were about to do with me just minutes ago. If you don't understand energy, don't be surprised if concepts like energy, light, gravity, and consciousness remain mysteries. And don't be surprised if all these mysteries find their source in God. The question of who created God isn't as difficult as it seems. When we refer to God as eternal and timeless, the answer becomes straightforward. As Keith Ward explains in his book, God, Chance, and Necessity. If someone asks what caused God, the answer is simple. Nothing could bring into being a reality that transcends space and time and is self-existent. Understanding this reveals that God is beyond the categories of beginning and end. Anything that begins to exist needs a cause. It cannot come from nothing. But something that is eternal and timeless doesn't require a cause. Even atheists, such as Daniel Dennett, acknowledge that eternal truths, like numbers or mathematical objects, do not need a cause because they never come into being. The concept of God works in the same way. God is an eternal and self-existent being, a primal necessity. Therefore, the simple answer is that God has no cause because he is self-existent. Our definition of God is as the uncreated creator of the universe, existing beyond time and space. To ask who created the uncreated creator is as nonsensical as asking about the sound of silence or what emptiness does. There is a certain definition of silence that stops us from asking such questions. Similarly, questioning who created the uncreated creator follows reasoning that doesn't apply to him. This brings us to an essential point. Christians base their faith on a God who was not created, while atheists often offer alternative explanations. As a former atheist myself, I also believed in an uncreated creator, though I understood it differently. Perhaps I thought of it as a multiverse generator or some quantum environment where universes spontaneously emerge. Whatever it was, the idea was that the universe was uncreated. In the end, everyone believes in some form of an uncreated creator. What I would like to ask is that you continue considering the story from the origin of the universe to the impact of God's spiritual essence on the material world. Given that we all believe in an uncreated creator in one form or another, the real question becomes, how does this creator relate to our continuum of time, space, and matter, which we call the continuum? Here's the heart of the issue. Time, space, and matter must have come into being simultaneously. If there were space without time, when would you place it? And if there were matter in space but no time, when would you place it? These elements are inseparable. They must coexist. The Bible addresses this elegantly in just 10 words. In the beginning, God created the heavens, space, and the earth, matter. Thus, time and space were created along with matter. These three elements form an essential trinity. Time comprises the past, present, and future. Space has length, width, and height. And matter exists in three states: gas, liquid, and solid. This trinity of trinities was created in an instant, and the God who created them exists beyond them, outside of time's limitations. If God were bound by time, he would cease to be God, for he would be limited by his own creation. The one who made this computer is not confined within it, pushing numbers around the screen. In the same way, the God who made the universe is not subject to its limitations. He exists beyond, above, and throughout the universe. He is not affected by the constraints of his creation. Now, considering Dan's argument that a spiritual force can't influence a physical body, this raises some interesting thoughts. How do we account for emotions? Love, hate, envy, jealousy, and even rational thinking. If our brain is just a random assembly of chemicals formed over billions of years, how can we even trust our reasoning or sense of right and wrong? I remember asking where God originated, but this question assumes God is limited, which he is not. The God I worship is beyond the limits of time and space. Even if I tried to confine him within my understanding, in my three-dimensional mind, he would still be worthy of worship. This fascinates me. He is beyond comprehension, and that is exactly why I worship him. It brings to mind a phrase I once read: when he stepped from the heels of the demon, the saint of the pan mouth and team. This points to the fact that God is not confined by any form or place. His presence is everywhere, transcending all limits. So, did he emerge from nothing? I shared this idea at a gathering in Detroit a while back, and a mathematician approached me afterward saying, "Reverend, let's be logical about this subject you're discussing tonight. Claiming that God came from nothing simply doesn't make sense. Let's be reasonable." I responded, "All right, let's be rational. The reason God came from nothing is that there was no place for him to come from. He didn't emerge from anywhere. And the reason he stood on nothing is that there was no ground for him to stand on. He extended his hand when there was nothing to grab, and he hung something where there was nothing to hang it on. Then he commanded, 'Stay there.' If you read Genesis chapter 1 verses 26 to 27, you'll see how he hung the world on nothing and stood on nothing. He took the hammer of his will and wielded the anvil of his omnipotence. Sparks flew, and he caught them with his fingers, flinging them into space to decorate the sky with stars, and no one questioned it. There was no one to contest. Then God himself declared, 'This is good.' And God gave Christ a name above every name, so that at the mention of Jesus, every knee should bow, whether in heaven, on earth, or under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father." I want to stress this point. The questions about God's origin and the nature of creation are deep, age-old mysteries that humanity has pondered for centuries. Regardless of one's beliefs, one fact remains. Our understanding of God and the universe is limited. The idea of an uncreated creator, a God beyond time, space, and matter, stretches our comprehension but also reminds us of the magnificence of the unknown. Wait, before you go, there's something crucial you need to see. The next video holds the key to answers you didn't even know you were missing. Don't leave without clicking. It could change everything.